What's up, everyone? Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to join me for some knowledge and information of what really is going on in the marketplace and what we could look for in next year's market. So I know it's a scary time right now. There's no shame in saying that whatsoever. And confidence is dwindling, right? But if we really peel back the onion and really understand what's going on, the fear goes away and we could really see that there's an opportunity there. So today, you're not going to hear the same crap you're seeing on social media or the news. We're really going to be looking at what's really going on in the housing market and what drives it. What the consumer is seeing out there on the news is that the housing market's under fire, housing bubble, rates going to 10%, so on and so forth. And remember, every marketer has their own agenda to drive sales. So let's just jump right into it. So sex sells, fear sells. And the mainstream media wants you to be addicted to their fear porn. They want to scare you with the news articles that come out, the headlines. So before we jump into it, let's go over a little agenda. First and foremost, this presentation is going to be about 40 to 45 minutes long. So just a heads up there. And here are some of the topics we're going to be covering. What is inflation? What is a recession? How do inflation and recessions affect housing? Will the housing market crash? How exactly are mortgage rates determined? What will happen in 2023 and beyond, right? So first, we got to understand, how did we get here? Between 2020 and March 2022, we had the great cessation, where everything stopped. The money supply in our economy increased 40%. Yikes. Okay. Trillions of dollars of stimulus dollars were printed, which was the most ever over 2 centuries. The Fed also purchased mortgage bonds, quantitative easing, to artificially keep mortgage rates low, causing a historical housing boom. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Factor in supply chain issues because of the global pandemic, and the cost of goods went up and up. Now, inflation, in short, the pandemic caused cheap access to money, which then increased the demand for goods, which was then further exacerbated due to supply chain issues, which then caused too many dollars chasing too few goods. Enter in inflation, oversupply of money circulating in the economy. And if not treated, inflation is like an infection. You get antibiotics and you feel better. But if you don't let it clear up, it will only get worse. Shout out to Barry Habib, the go-to mortgages. Now, what is inflation? Too many dollars chasing too many goods. Okay, the Fed rate hikes equals more bank deposits, and borrowing slows down. As a result, supply chains begin to improve. Now, the Fed is fighting an inflation infection, and the Fed thought inflation was transitory, not an infection. Transitory means not permanent. But it ended up being a runaway inflation, a bad infection. And now they have to take drastic measures to cure it by slowing down the cheap access to money, antibiotics. They are sucking money out of the economy now through interest rate hikes, which in turn decreases consumer spending, incentivizes consumer savings, improves supply chain systems. And all this leads to lower inflation. Now, let's jump right into it. So the most important thing to understand is mortgage rates and inflation go hand in hand. They're really tied at the hip. Okay, so if you could see here, on the bottom is inflation, on the top is the 30-year fixed mortgage. So you can see here, as inflation goes up, so do mortgage rates. As inflation starts to tick down, so does mortgage rates. As inflation goes sideways, stays stagnant, so do mortgage rates. Okay, and you could see it here went from 4 to 5%. Then from 5 to 4, from 4 all the way down to 3 here, which we'll talk about a little bit. But beginning of 2020, we hit a double whammy. The recession hit first, and then we got hit with COVID. Enter quantitative easing. Now, quantitative easing is the Fed buying mortgage bonds. And you might be thinking, why are they buying mortgage bonds? Well, it's to control interest rates, to control the economy, and to really keep mortgage rates around 3%. So as you can see here, from early 2020 to almost the end of 2021, rates were in the 3, right? Refi boom, everyone was busy. You remember those golden days. Feels like yesterday, but also feels like 100 years ago of what we've been dealing with in the market today. Now, beginning of quantitative easing, inflation was low, as you could see here. But then it started to move up. And what did the Fed say? The Fed said it was non-transitory, which means not permanent. Well, the Fed admitted they were wrong and how little they understood inflation. When the Fed stopped quantitative easing and took the guardrails off, what happened? You could see inflation went through the roof, but when they stopped quantitative easing, so did mortgage rates. As inflation rose, so did mortgage rates. So now we see the relationships intact between the Fed or between the mortgage rates and inflation because the Fed is not rigging the game with quantitative easing. So that's extremely important to understand. So if you want to know when the housing market will get better, when are mortgage rates going to get better? The answer is, when is inflation going to come down? And what drives mortgage rates, contrary to popular belief, it's not the Federal Reserve. It's actually inflation. So the problem is the way that inflation is measured and the way the Fed looks at inflation by looking at data that's old. It's averaged over the last year. So here, as you can see, is the core consumer price index, currently at 6.6%. It's technically right now at 6.3. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So let's take a look at inflation and the reading over the last 16 months. Something to know that's important. There are 2 different types of inflation readings. The first one, headline inflation, includes all inflation numbers. But the core inflation that we're looking at here removes food prices and energy prices. And that's what we're looking at here. The Fed removes it because they don't have any influence over those, energy or food. Food prices are affected by weather. The Fed can't control the weather by increasing rates, so they take it out. Now, we've seen this coming this summer because we knew the readings were low. And what I mean by that is we saw inflation going up, which we knew mortgage rates were going to go up this year, earlier this summer. And the reason for that is because as these high numbers were coming in right here, they were replacing these. Remember, the core consumer price index, CPI, which is measured inflation without food or energy, looks at the last 12 months. Okay, so as these 2 big numbers came in August and September, it replaced these super low numbers. So inflation went up from the mid to upper 5s, around that area, to the mid to upper 6s in August and September because they replaced these low readings. Now, something you don't see on this chart is on Thursday, November 10th, the October readings came out and it was at 0.3%. Well, not sure if you remember that day, but that day is when interest rates went down significantly. The biggest day, the single biggest day in history of mortgage rates going down. And it shows how it's tied to inflation. So October reading was 0.3%. Well, guess what? It replaced 0.6. So now currently year over year, core consumer price index is at 6.3% and mortgage rates went down. Now, the next reading is next Tuesday, December 13th. Keep this number in mind, 0.5%. We're looking for the November reading. If it's 0.5 again, we're going to stay at 6.3%. If it's at 0.4, we're going to go to 6.2%. 0.3, we're going to go to 6.2, or excuse me, 6.1. Okay, so on and so forth. So we're hoping for a reading at 0.5 or lower. And if we get that, rates are going to start to come down. But look at all these high numbers that are about to be replaced come December, January, February. And this is when we're projecting rates to go down. Okay. Now, as we look at the next slide, shelter costs are lagging, right? The core CPI is mainly driven by shelter costs. As of late, they are coming down, as you see here, which is awesome. But when the Fed looks at it, it averages over the last 12 months. And the averages are lacking, right? Notice how this looks something familiar when we were kids, right? And that's a roller coaster. So if we go back and look at it, right? Here's the front of the roller coaster. Here's the back of the roller coaster, right? Here's the real shelter cost. Here's the high end, the peak, and then we're still going up, right? Tick, 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 right? I wasn't brave enough to go in the front, maybe did it once and probably never did it again, was way too scared, right? Not a huge roller coaster guy, risk reward, not there for me, but that's here nor there. But come January, right? The end of the roller coaster is going to be at the top here, and everything is going to be screaming down. So 5.9% is real world, okay? The way the Fed looks at it, again, is over the 12 months. And by January, everything's going to come down, and we're going to be heading in the right direction. Now, let's take a quick look at a 30-year mortgage rate versus a 10-year treasury, 10-year treasury spread, okay? This is extremely high level, and nobody really looks at this stuff, but it's very, very critical. And I'm going to simplify it and explain it so you could explain it to your clients as well. Now, normal spread is between 175 and 200 basis points, 1.75% to 2%. That's what it really means, okay? Now, they're not always exactly identical every single day, 175 to 200 basis points apart, but for the most part, on average, they are, right? As you could see here, 10-year treasuries at 1%, mortgage rates at 3%. 10-year treasuries at 4%, mortgage rates at 6%. 4, 6, 5, 7, 5, 7, right? They're usually around 200 apart. Today, the relationship is broken. The current spread is 300 basis points, 3%. It's abnormal. We've never seen this before. Nobody holds a 30-year mortgage for a long time, right? So just to take a step back, anytime anyone gets a mortgage, right, like guaranteed rate, we produce a mortgage, we don't hold it. It's sold in the secondary market. And whoever buys it is what's called the servicer, right? Now, a servicer is somebody that collects payments, manages escrow account, pay the taxes and insurance, and sends you statements. Now, the longer you think you're going to hold the mortgage as a servicer, the more value it has. Now, let's think about it. In today's environment, right now, rates are in the low to mid 6s, but when they are in 7%, what servicer is going to pick that up? Knowing that whoever gets a mortgage in the 7s is going to refinance shortly. And that servicer is going to lose the value in the money. So at 7%, the value is 0 because people are going to refinance. Servicing value has literally been sucked out of this, creating a wider gap that we've never seen before. So when inflation comes down, so will the 10-year treasury, and mortgage rates will come down even faster because there's a bigger spread. So if mortgage rates drop to 5%, and here's the first projection, is we do see mortgage rates going to the mid-5s by Q2. Okay, so April, May, June, expect mortgage rates to be in the 5s. This is great news. Now, when they do drop that low, your world changes because there's so many buyers out there that are lurking that will buy at 5-point-something% that were scared to buy at 7%. Many buyers have a 3.5% mortgage rate and are afraid to give that up for a 6-7% mortgage rate. But they'll give it up for 5-5.5% for the home of their dreams. And something to keep in mind is half the mortgages out there in this country are below 4%. Half of them are above 4%. So just something to keep in mind. All right. Now, every time the Fed hikes the rate, it leads to a recession. And it's clear as day one, right? So even in 1955, Fed funds rate right here goes up, recession, goes up, recession, goes up, recession, up, recession, up, recession, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And here's where we are here. The Fed fund rate is continuing to go up. In 1 week from today, December 14th, the Fed is going to hike the rate again. It's projected another 50 basis points, taking the Fed fund rate to 4.25 to 4.5%. Today, as it stands on December 7th, it's at 3.75 to 4.25%. Okay, it's going to go up 0.5%. Now, as a result of all this, the U.S. economy will fall into a recession if we're already not in one. Okay, what is a recession? It's when there's a general decline, overall economy, activity, and output declines, measured by gross domestic product for 2 consecutive quarters. So generally, companies generate fewer sales, reduce their workforce, and people spend less money, which causes an overall slowdown. And the Fed rate hikes almost always lead to recessions, and as we talked in the previous slide. Some people then will argue that we're not in a recession due to historically low unemployment rate, currently at 3.7%. Well, recessions always start with low unemployment rates. All 12 recessions since 1950 initiated an unemployment rate below 5%, which we just witnessed on the previous slide. Now, recessions start when it's the lowest level of unemployment and it starts coming up, excuse me. So unemployment rates in recession, as you can see here, lowest level, start coming up, recession. Lowest level, up, recession. Lowest level, up, recession, so on and so forth. I feel like a parrot repeating myself, but that's what's going on. That's where we're getting our data and history from, and it repeats itself every single time. So what's going on? 2 weeks ago, we went from 3.5, the lowest it's been, it's starting to tick up to 3.7. Now, majority of us are in the real estate industry, right? That's why you're here, learning about what is going on. And if you're in the mortgage industry, just like me, we've seen a ton of layoffs, a lot of layoffs. Why? Business has slowed down. We're all feeling it, right? Now, if you think about it, last month, I'm sure you heard in the news, Facebook, 13% of its workforce laid off. Facebook, right? We all have Facebook. We all go on Facebook. A big power company laid off 13%. Well, what happens when people get laid off? There's no more fancy dinners, buying cars, clothes shopping. The car dealership, the restaurants, the clothing store all start to feel the slowdown. And what do they have to do? They have to let people go. Cycle perpetuates, and that's why unemployment shoots up and we go into a recession every single time, as you see here. Now, the good news is recessions affect mortgage rates in a positive way. So let's take a look at the last 6 recessions since 1980. Every single time we entered a recession, rates have come down. Here, early 2000s, housing crash, and even some forgot we had a mini recession in 2020 and rates came down. So let's take a closer look. 1980 went down a little over 4%. 82 went down 5%. 91 went down a little over 2%. 2001 went down a little over 0.5%. During the housing crash, went down over 1%. And then majority of us lived the housing boom, right? And refinance boom, where rates went to historical lows. And that's where a lot of millennials are kind of stuck. Now, what about the housing market? How does a recession affect the housing market? Well, 8 out of 9 times home prices went up during a recession. As you can see here, 9 recessions, continue to go up through the recessions, didn't go down until we got to the housing bubble, the housing crash, right? Now, to be clear, this one time, the housing bubble and housing crash caused the recession. The real issue was supply and demand, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, okay? But as you can see here, the recession was caused due to the housing crash. Home prices went down, and since then, they've gone to record highs. And a lot of us have felt that, especially if you're a homeowner, over the last couple years. Prices went up, home values went up 10, 15, 20, some places 25, 30%, which is just bonkers. But it all has to do with supply and demand. Now, home values and recessions. Home values have increased in 8 out of the 9 recessions as mentioned, except 2008 due to a loosened home lending standards, the exact opposite of the current lending standards. 92% of all subprime loans were adjustable rate mortgages. Also, credit scores are way better than they were 14 years ago during the housing crash, as you can see here. And as already mentioned above, the amount of ARMs, the percentage of ARMs is down significantly compared to the housing crash. So we're seeing the exact opposite of 2008. Now, demand is created by household formations. Let's pause here and let me explain what is a household formation. So let's take an example, a mom, a dad, and they have a kid that's 33 years old, okay? The kid moves out at 33 and just, whether they're renting or living at home, let's just assume they're living at home. When that kid moves out at 33, it's the same family, but now the kid moves out and buys his or her own place. And now that one family has two dwellings. Household growth has happened. Another formation has happened. So as you can see here in the blue, these are household formations. In the gold, these are annual completions by builders, new homes going up. But what do you notice here? 2006, there was a dramatic drop. Why? What happened in 2006? Well, if we know and understand that the average age of the first-time homebuyer is 33 years old, why don't we go back in time and subtract 33 years from 2006, and that gets us to 1973. Well, what happened in 1973 to cause this dramatic decline in births and population? What happened here? Okay. Wouldn't it be interesting if birth rates dropped? And they did. So what really happened in 1973 is abortions became legal. Now, I'm not here to get political one way or another. I'm just here to share facts. In 1973, abortions became legal. Now, if we go back, holy cow, 33 years later, look at this drop-off. Dramatic drop-off. Now, the issue is builders didn't get the memo. Remember how I mentioned the housing crash was all about supply and demand, right? If you think about it, look at the demand. Look at the supply. It is completely upside down and backwards. That's how you get into a housing crash, not to mention predatory lending, the ARMs, no income, no job, all those type of loans. If you've ever seen The Big Short, the movie, that is a great movie to understand really what's happening in a fun, good way. Okay. Now, demand is staying strong, right? As you can see, we've recovered. Look at the blue, household growth, demand, it's gone up. But now the supply is down. Why? Builders are scared to build because of 06, 7, 8, and 9, right? They were late to the party. They didn't get the memo, and boom, the crash happens. So now they're trying to build again, but now we're dealing with supply chain issues. We just went over COVID, things of that nature, okay? So if we go back 33 years from today, it would be 1989. 1989 puts us right here. Look what's happening with births 33 years ago. 1990, 91, 92, they're all going up. So buyers are lurking. They're just waiting for rates to drop. And when you unleash them with lower rates, like we'll get next year, what are we unleashing them into? Hold that question. We're going to discuss that here in a little bit. Now, quick summary of what we just discussed. 66 million millennials were born between 1980 and 1994. If you ever wonder what a millennial is, who a millennial is, 1980, born 1980, 1994. I was born in 1983. My birthday is next Thursday, the 15th, right? I'll be turning 39. I'm considered a millennial, okay? 33 years old is the average age of a first-time home buyer. 80% of this demographic is nearing their prime home buying age. That's exciting. That's who we got to market. And here is one of my most favorite stats. 75% of all U.S. employment by 2025 will be held by these millennials. Now, with that being said, everyone's income is starting to go up too. Projection average increase is for employee wages is over 9% next year. That's very, very exciting. Now, household formations have dropped because they're waiting for rates to drop, right? What's normal is around 1.7 million, right around here. Today, we're at about 1.3 million. What happens when we go back to normal and unleash those 400,000 buyers into the marketplace? Remember, demand is created by household formations. Those buyers are ready. They're lurking. They're just waiting for rates to go down. Now, there's a shortage of 4 million homes. That's the crazy part. Okay. Existing home inventory, it's small. And I'll show that and prove that to you here shortly. Now, new housing supply. Builders are cautious because they learned from their lesson from 06, 7, 8, and 9, as mentioned previously, right? Last year, 1.4 million homes were built. We have to factor in 100,000 being destroyed, right? Hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding, so on and so forth. We witnessed that, especially in Florida, the southern states. So the new supply is 1.3 million. Household formations, 1.3 million. Okay. Now, today, we're nowhere near where we were in the housing bubble, the housing crash, right? Back then, we had 4 million homes available. Today, 1.25 million. Very low. But that's not the full story. Okay, inventory has gone up, right? Since April, holy cow, look at this. Since April, March, April, right around here, look at the inventory. Holy cow, it's gone up, right? We've seen it go up from the lowest inventory ever on record here. So what are we really getting excited about? This is just a one-year picture. Let's take a look at a 10-year picture. Okay. You see a pattern here? This happens every single year, over and over. This is the COVID year right here. So that was disturbed. But year in year, it happens every single year. Now, do you remember when you were a kid and a new kid came in the middle of the class, in the middle of the school year? They had a hard time adjusting, making new friends, and we all know kids can be mean. Trust me, I was bullied at a young age. I remember that. Still affects me to this day. Now, parents want their kids to start fresh in a new school year so they can make their friends, right? Where it's not too hard to join the middle of a school year. So that means they have to move in June, July, August, right? Now, if they have a home to sell, they have to put that home on the market April, May, June, July, right? Right here, right here. They're putting it on the market, inventory goes up, okay? Now, media will never tell you this because it doesn't sell. Remember, fear sells, fear porn, okay? Now, existing home inventory, when you look at existing home inventory, you don't get the real story, right? I told you there was 1.25 million homes available, and that's the number you see. Issue is homes under contract are included in that number. You can't buy a home that's under contract. Now, I know there's one-offs, somebody's under contract, they fall out, inspection, and so on and so forth, but let's be real. If a home's under contract, as a listing agent, you shouldn't be showing that home to other people. You could take on backup offers, right? But that number shouldn't be included in that. So the active listings we currently have is 732,000. So what happens when you unleash $400,000 buyer into this market, especially when rates come down? The answer is multiple offer scenarios. Now, here's what inventory looks like on active listings. Some will say active listings are up from last year. Well, that's compared to the lowest level ever in history. Why don't we compare it to 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? It's much lower, right? So don't let the media give you a bunch of crap that the housing market is in trouble, because it's not, okay? Fake news alert, more fear porn. CBS Market Watch, dramatic increase. Foreclosures filings are up more than 150%. Really? Really? Okay. Now, that's not false. This is true. But let's look into it. Yes, they're up more than 150% from last year. But look at last year, 65,000 total, the lowest ever in history. Why not compare it to 2019, just 3 years ago? Because it's down 60% from 2019. Why not compare it to 2010, the highest year ever for foreclosures, 1.6 million. Wow. Wow. But it's down 90% from 2010. Why not compare it to that? And you know why? Because that doesn't sell. Fear sells. Okay. Oh, so many foreclosures. Really? With this equity that you see here? The average loan to value right now in America, every single home, is 42%. That means they have 58% equity in their home. Now, majority of these are baby boomers, but still, back in 2008, loan to value was 81%, only 19% average of equity. Look how much home prices have gone up. This is how much equity people are gaining. If you put 20% down back in 2008, you were above average of having more equity in your home than the average person. That's just wild. And no, housing will not crash. Foreclosure activity, 2008 to 2022, is a huge difference. It's a 90% drop. But again, you're not going to hear that in the news. You're going to hear it directly from me because these are the facts, this is the data, and this is the truth. And these are the conversations you should be having with your clients to get them excited about real estate, because I sure as hell am. Okay. Now, real estate does create wealth, right? Majority of us know that. In the last 63 years, real estate averages have gone up on average about 4.5%. So let's use an example, 4% appreciation. Purchase price is $400,000. So 10% down in this example, the investment's $40,000. If we have 4% appreciation, that's $16,000 in profit. On your $40,000 investment, that's a 40% return. Again, 40%. Now, some are going to say, well, don't you have to pay a mortgage? Well, yeah, you have to pay a mortgage, but weren't you paying rent before? So you got to have some type of payment, 40%, 40. Now, housing forecast. We predict that there will be single-digit appreciation, around 5.5%. Rents will continue to rise, 12% on new leases and 8% on renewals. Okay. Here are some fun facts and projections. Homes have appreciated 4.59% on average since 1963. Homes are projected to appreciate 5.5% yearly next year. Rents are projected to increase 13% on new leases. I know 12 was mentioned, it's about 12, 13%, and 8% on renewals. The average 30-year mortgage rate in the past 50 years has been 7.76%. In my opinion, individuals in their late 30s, 40s, and older understand this because they lived when rates were higher. But think about the younger millennials, right? Individuals in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s, they haven't lived to see this, right? And when they were alive, they were either wearing diapers in kindergarten, grade school, right? They weren't aware of what's going on. So it's our job to educate them. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate next year will be around 5.5%. Right? I'm putting my name and stamp on that. Come holler at me, Q2, right? April, May, June, we're going to be in the mid-5s. Rents across the US just rose above $2,000 a month for the first time ever. That's mind-blowing. New homes are not being built to help with supply, right? Again, as mentioned earlier, builders are scared of 2006, 7, 8, and 9. New homeowners will flood the market and spike demand. We already showed that with charts and graphs. And prices will increase again due to the multiple offer scenarios of too many buyers, not enough homes. Now, this is truly the perfect opportunity in housing if you see it. As mentioned, incomes are increasing, average 9% next year. Inventory is tight. It's a great time to buy right now. Right? I literally bought an investment property. My rate is 7.625%. Ugh, garbage. But guess what? Buy the home, right? Marry the home, date the rate. It's an investment home. I don't love it. I love the money of it. It's a great deal. I know I got a deal because there's not much demand there. Homes are sitting. My rate is high. Okay, I'm going to refinance in 6 months. And I'm literally doing the BRRRR method. Rates are dropping. Hence, I'm going to refinance later, as many will. And there's increased buyer activity drives the prices higher. And we're going to have those multiple offer scenarios because think about how many clients you had that were thinking about buying this year, and due to rates going up, they said, I'm going to hold off till next year. That's something important to keep in mind. Now, the time to maximize pessimism is the best time to buy. Thanks to Sir John Templeton. I agree with this. That's why I bought my investment property. Okay. Now is the time. As Warren Buffett says, when everyone is fearful, be greedy. Now is a great time to be greedy. Now, last but not least, this second last slide, we're almost done. Net worth tiers. So if you want to be in the top 1%, right? You got to have 10.8 million. We all want to create wealth, right? That's why we work hard. Well, if you want to be in the top 2%, you got to have 2.5 million. Top 5%, 1 million. Top 10%, 800,000. And top 50%, 500,000. Okay? This is huge. Now, on average, 2/3 of net worth is created from home equity. That is wild. You're not going to get there by being a renter or being afraid to buy because you can't see beyond the headlines, as I just explained and showed you. Get in the game because this is a great time to create wealth, period. Now, remember, be careful when following the masses because sometimes the M is silent. Okay? Facts over fear, data over drama, actual over adjectives. Remember, and hopefully I pointed that out to you. Now, closing remarks. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Okay? To be clear, I am not a professional speaker. I do not get paid to be a professional speaker. I'm a professional loan officer. Truly love what I do. With that being said, if you got some nuggets today from this presentation, please share them with your clients. And hopefully I've earned your next referral. Majority of you I work with, some of you were just starting a relationship, and I would be honored to take great care of your client. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you got some good information you can share with your clients. And I promise I will follow up with every single person that tuned into this webinar to see what questions you have, follow up, and we'll go from there. Thank you again, and take care.